shocking figures in an American Center for Politics poll concerning rationalizing the use of violence to achieve political ends, which is kind of what terrorism is it not? The use of violence to achieve political ends? Well, 41% of Democrats, according to this poll, thought violence was acceptable if that's what it took to stop Republicans from achieving their goals. Among not Republicans per se, but among Trump supporters, 38% considered violence acceptable. In both instances, they talked about using violence to protect our democracy. And of course, officially, we don't have one. This is a Republican form of government. There's a difference between a democracy and a republic. In a democracy, the voice of the people is the voice of God. Whatever majority says, that goes for everybody. In a republic, government is the public's business, but not all business is the government's. The government is restrained by a constitution. Maybe I should say that again, because in a republic, government is the public's business, but not all business is that of government. It is restrained by something, in our case, a constitution. There are areas of life that these are off limits to the government. Here's your rights. That means, like, even if the majority don't like what I say, I still got the right to say it. Even if the majority don't like my religion, I still have a right to practice it. Even if the majority don't like me owning a gun, I still have a right to own it. That is a republic, not a democracy. And that bothers some people. And the way they've been able to get away with it is that, in my opinion, in many ways, one of those is we're divided into only two parties. And so they can see the other side, well, that's the evil side right there, and we're the good side. And both sides think that. And as far as the other side being the evil side, they may both be right. So obviously, to stop the one evil guy and you're the good guy, you do anything, even violence, and the government is ignoring the Constitution. Why should we feel bound by it? And that's going on a lot. There's lawfare. There's the weaponization of warfare. There's police. If you're caught driving with a bunch of money, the police just take it and try to make you prove that you weren't using it for any no good purpose to get it back. They're basically robbers with badges now. So if you have a corrupt government, if you have corrupt leaders, and we do, eventually the people are going to lose faith in the government. When you lose faith in the government is what keeps us from using violence to resolve disputes. We trust the government to sort these things out and to bring justice. And when the government doesn't do that, all they've got left is brute force. So we're losing all that. And I sincerely believe a part of the answer is that we need more choices. We need more parties. The Democratic Party may split with RFK Jr. doing his thing. I hope so. It needs to split. But the Republican Party definitely needs to split between those who are very much in favor of Donald Trump and those who are opposed to Donald Trump. They need to split. Now, what if there were 5 parties? What if there were 7 parties? What would that do to these people saying violence is justified to stop the other guys because they're so evil? Well, I think it would intellectually undermine their position. Because if you only have 2 sides, you could be the good guys and the other side could be the bad guys. If there are 5 sides and you say you're the good guy and the other 4 are bad, that just doesn't make sense, does it? It doesn't make there may even be more of you than there is of any one of them, but it doesn't make sense if there's 5 positions here and each of those other positions is so bad that I am justified in using violence to get my way. And that's really what they're talking about. They're talking about ignoring the protections of the Constitution. They may call it something else. They may call it popular constitutionalism. That is, they say, well, we're only going to enforce the parts of the Constitution that are popular. Well, that's no constitutionalism at all, is it? The Constitution was meant to protect us from the government and from each other acting through the government. It doesn't matter whether it's popular. That's the whole point of having a Constitution with a Bill of Rights. It's to limit the state. So popular constitutionalism is just a rhetorical trick. It isn't constitutionalism at all. And there are many people, they're so convinced that all wisdom is held in their own generation and that previous generations just were no good and didn't get it, that they can ignore the voice of everyone that lived before them and completely restructure society in some way they think's best. It won't be best, of course, because not all wisdom is bound up in this generation. A lot of foolishness. In some ways, we're uniquely bad. You know, a lot of people, particularly on the left, think this generation is uniquely good and so much better than those misogynistic slave owners of the past. The truth is, we've aborted 70 million of our own citizens here in America, unborn. We've killed them. The rest of them, we've enslaved because the debt is unpayable. The debt of the next generation is unpayable. And so it's very ironic, these young people that think this current generation's values that they've been taught by this current generation's institutions are so wonderful compared to past generations, when in the truth, this is the bloodiest generation, especially in terms of innocent blood, but also in terms of all but the biggest wars, you know, just as far as keeping low-grade conflicts going, and of just downright generational looting and thievery, of which they're the victims. They are dismissing the voices of tradition because they're being told to, but in a way that they think it's their own idea. They're dismissing the voices of tradition. And those other generations, they may have had slaves, they may have done some bad things, but they would never dream of borrowing that kind of money and shifting it onto the backs of their children and grandchildren. That would be morally repugnant to them. So I think we're in one of the least moral generations of all time that considers itself by far the most moral. That is a recipe for disaster. That is not a realistic self-image, and it's out of contact with reality. And unfortunately, there's going to be consequences for that. You can't proceed in delusion and expect things to turn out okay. But one of the steps that we should have taken long ago to diffuse this thing, to diffuse it, is to have more parties and to have more voices and to have more choices. Because if there are just two voices, if there's no coalition, if there's just two groups, and you're evenly divided and you're fighting over the one gun that you get to point at everybody else, yeah, the stakes are too high. Yeah, you start to think, well, if we don't get the gun by fair means, let's get it by foul. Especially when you think the other side is cheating either by using the courts to overturn elections, using ballot stuffing, or getting votes from old folks' homes where the people aren't right, but they just pay the attendees to get the old people to sign the votes away, and they really were not in their right mind anymore. Or even, in many states, elections were not conducted in accordance with state law. And yet, those election results are being enforced. Well, guess what? If your election results, I'm sitting here in one state, and yet there are other states, their senators, let's say, are elected in a manner where they do not follow their own state election law. I question the legitimacy of those elections. And when those states when those senators from those states pass laws that I don't approve of in my state, laws that probably the federal government has no business passing and should be left out each state anyway, but when they pass sweeping laws, after a while I start to think, what? Those laws are not legitimate. We should not be bound by those laws. We question whether the elections that were held to elect those senators are fair and free elections conducted in accordance with law. So there are consequences to all this desperation to grab political power. The more desperate people are to grab political power, the more corners they're willing to cut to grab political power. Ironically, it undermines political power because people lose faith in government. So we need a side that is focused on the process and keeping the process honest. Beside what policies are endorsed, the process itself needs to be conducted fairly. And I'm afraid there is not much time for this message to be heeded. So I hope it will be. Thank you for listening.